Hello everyone, this is going to be a slightly different video because I lost all of the audio for about an hour's worth of recording for this. I won't bother explaining why. I'm just going to try and make the most of this video by doing some voiceover. So it's the usual kind of thing. I've got a Gameboy Color here. I'm going to open it up. We're going to look inside and kind of analyze exactly what it is we've got in front of us, because eBay pictures don't always do enough justice to describe the state of the consoles that we buy them in. So as I said before, this is a Game Boy Color purchased off eBay. I'll put the kind of pricing in the description from eBay up on the screen. This one is a little bit different, and I'm excited to do this one because this is a Game Boy Color that someone else has tried to repair, and they've sold it because they couldn't get it working. So if we take a closer look at the Game Boy Color we've got here, we can see that on the front there's like a strange color, strange filter on the lens. Now you can see there's a line there which tells me they've obviously used a polarizing filter, but I think if that line's there, they've not removed some of the protective film that sits on top. But anyway, what I'm going to do is just grab a few batteries just here and chuck them in, and we'll turn it on and see what happens. Okay, so you can see here when I turn the Game Boy on, the screen appears, and apologies for my reflection there, kind of ruining it, but it's inverted. So we've got like a dark brown background with a kind of white logo and the white Game Boy lettering. So whatever polarizing filter the previous person has used is the incorrect polarizing filter. So that's one thing I know I'm going to have to fix. So having taken this apart, I noticed immediately that capacitor C38 was missing, and also the pad looks like it's missing as well. They've got some weird screws that they've used for the board that don't look like they were original screws, but they fit, so they've obviously just gone ahead with that. Okay, so having removed the board here so we can get access to the screen itself, obviously the screen just pulls out because the person's removed the screen before, and the polarizer isn't even attached to it, it's on the shell itself. Okay, great. We're going to move on to the board here, and you can see that the person has tried to repair this. I say tried, it does boot up, so whatever problem they had before, they've overcome it, but the soldering on this is, well, I'm not good. I'm no expert, but I'm damn sure that I'm going to be able to do better than that. And hopefully in this video we will see a slight improvement in soldering than the person before. And that's not me bashing them. Obviously everybody starts somewhere, but it doesn't seem right. It's almost like, I don't know, maybe they've not used any flux at all and they've used some weird dodgy solder, but yeah, I'm going to get that removed and put my own one in, or try and fix it a different way. Because obviously they're bridging here from the battery negative terminal to the ground pin on the DC jack. So first things first, I'm going to get the wire removed that the previous owner has put in themselves. The amount of solder took a while to heat up here, but also I noticed, and I don't know if it'll be captured on camera or in this video, but the solder seemed to separate itself from the old solder that came with the Game Boy originally and the new solder that they used. It seemed to not want to mix together. So I'm just going to start clearing that up, get rid of the majority of it, and also I want to get the negative terminal completely out. So I'm just using the solder socket here to get rid of as much as I can, and the terminal there, you can see it's just dropped straight out. I need to get rid of this because I want to clean up the area, and I need to check to see why there was that much solder on the underside, and just to see exactly what happened. So what I would say is from the battery terminal here, there's a copper trace that feeds all the way down to this ground pin on the DC jack. So that's obviously what they're bridging there, because it's not making connection from the battery terminal itself to that ground pin via the board. So there must be some corrosion or something that I'm going to have to take a look at to try and figure out exactly why they put that in the first place. So as you'll see here, when I try to melt this solder to suck it up using a solder socket, an entire kind of chunk of that solder falls away. I think this is where the new solder that the person who tried to repair it used to try and put in with the old solder, and it either just didn't mix together properly, or I genuinely don't know, but it just completely did not mix properly and fell off from the original solder. So here, this is where I'm testing the continuity between this negative battery terminal and that ground pin. So I'm kind of wedging it in to the battery terminal in there, where obviously it would sit and make contact with the board, and I'm getting nothing, absolutely nothing at all. So personally, I think there is some corrosion that sits in between that battery terminal and the ground pin that I'm going to get rid of, just so it doesn't spread in the future. Okay, so as you can see here, this negative battery terminal area is not in good condition. You can see the PCB layer mask has started to flake away, and also the capacitor, that negative pad, doesn't look to be in great condition, so I have to try and fix that as well. So I'm just going to start scraping away with my X-Acto knife here, just getting rid of that that PCB layer mask on top, and you can see the amount of corrosion that's collected and started to spread underneath. So you've really got to be careful with some of these older boards that may look like they don't have any corrosion, and I fall victim to this all the time, of just looking at it overall, not seeing anything too bad, whereas underneath there could be the copper's already started to corrode and obviously cause issues, or if not, will cause issues in the future. So here I'm just going to scrape it away and try and clean it up as best as possible. So I'm bringing in my exposed PCB here just to do a kind of comparison to see what's around this battery negative terminal area, because I don't want to scrape off too much of this layer mask, which would obviously then expose some of the copper, which can be live, can be shorted, so I don't want to scrape too much. But as you can see, it kind of sits isolated on this side of the board, which means obviously when it's transferring the power, it's then going through the hole and passing it through to the other side of the board. So I don't want any of the negative terminal touching any of that copper around it, so I just need to be careful of that. So as you can see here, that negative terminal has a like metal pad. I'm not sure what the material is, it's not copper, but it's completely gone on this board that I'm working on. So if I was to even put the terminal back in and solder it down, there's nowhere for the solder to stick, and then there's nowhere for that solder to then make continuity from the terminal to the board. So what the person was doing before is they had the negative battery terminal come pushed through. They then soldered a wire, a big blob of solder, to connect the wire to the terminal, and then that piece of wire would then touch the ground on the DC jack. Because obviously this here, you can see the start of this copper trace as it feeds down to the left towards the start button. That would touch the solder pad for where the battery terminal will go. So you can see there, I'm doing a test, I get continuity. Obviously there's no metal there, so if I touch it, you can't hear because the audio messed up, but I don't get any continuity. As soon as I touch this exposed copper, I do get continuity. So whatever happened, whatever this person had done, or whatever state this board was in before, that pad that should be there on that negative terminal is obviously no longer there. So now I'm going to replace the C38 capacitor. So the one I need is this middle one here. It's 100 microfarads at 4 volts. So I have that one on hand, and I'm going to get that just now. So coming to install this capacitor, I discovered that the negative pad was actually still there. It was still conductive and was still part of the PCB, so I didn't have to try and do any rerouting the negative terminal or the negative part of the capacitor to somewhere else on the board, it was fine as is. So just put some bit of solder down, tacked one side into place, and then just did the opposite side. Pretty straightforward capacitor install. Now I need to get the negative battery terminal actually installed to the board and in some kind of pretty solid manner. So you can see here I've got a pair of pliers, and I'm just kind of crimping the pins that push through so that it holds itself in place. It doesn't really matter because there's no real intention of me ever taking this terminal off again. But obviously if I do, it'll just be a little bit more difficult than normal. But for this board, because there is no metal pad for the solder to stick to on this side of the board, just like the original person did trying to repair this, I just need to build up enough solder that takes to the legs and therefore just stops it falling back through. So now I need to allow that negative terminal to reach a kind of ground point, which again on the original fix that the person before me tried, they had a wire that just jumped from the negative terminal to the ground pin on the DC jack. So I'm just going to do that myself. Obviously I'm anticipating this will be a bit of a better solder job overall, but their original kind of repair to fix this to get it to boot up was perfectly fine, just the execution wasn't as good. And again, I'm no professional at this. I'm not saying my execution is any better, but it's at least a little bit better. So at this stage I would show you the board turning on, or at least the sound, but obviously because I lost sound you just have to take my word for it. Okay, so what we need to do now is fix the screen. Now obviously the screen itself, I'll show you, is working. So if I turn it on, obviously nothing appears on the screen, but if we take the original, lens that they had on, I'm trying to find it here, so it was, I removed it from the Gameboy shell. You can see it was inverted, doesn't matter which way we put it, rotate it round, it's just inverted. This is the wrong polarizing filter. This is, I think, for a Game Boy Pocket and Game Boy, well, DMG. So these polarizing filters are for Game Boy Color. I'll put a link to the shop that I bought these from in the description. I've kind of already tested this, but here you go, you can see it works, and it doesn't matter like which angle I put it at. I could put it upside down, 45 degrees, we get the same result. I'm just checking to see if there's a stronger... No, it's the same if it's rotating up. Now this is the one, I've kind of pre-cut this and test it, but I haven't touched it. My fingerprints are all over it. That's obviously no good. So, because I've ordered about 10 of them, and you can just literally, you can probably get, I don't think you'd be able to get 3 out of a single sheet, but you definitely get 2. So I've got the rest of the sheet here that I can just cut up and take from. But before I do that, I need to make sure that this surface is completely dust-free, dirt-free, whatever, because there's no point sticking it down if you're going to have dirt or debris that sits under the screen and therefore refuses to allow it to sit flush, and you get little air bubbles and things like that. So and I'm just lining up to see how much I would need to cut. So let's get some scissors. Just about there. And then about there is fine. So I'm going to try and press it and stick it from the middle, and then let the rest of it kind of adhere from the middle outward. That way we kind of get not many air bubbles in the middle, and this should press themselves out from there. Now, I say should, we'll see how well this works. Okay, so there's a clear difference between, so obviously I made sure it was stuck down the middle and held the sides up and then let the weight of it sit down, but it didn't quite do that. So I just got a microfiber towel and wiped and progressively moved my way towards the edge. No bubbles this side, didn't do it that side, and there are bubbles that side. So what I'm gonna have to do is just work those bubbles out, annoyingly, because they can take ages to move towards the edge, if at all, ever. So I may have to lift up one side and redo this, but we'll see. But you know, I think that's actually pretty good. I'm quite happy with that. Let's test it. Now obviously I have not removed the top filament, so let's just, I say filament, is that the right word? Probably not. The top film. So let's connect this up and let's just see. So, oh, there we go, it's worked, perfect. So there is a top layer to remove, but I think what I'm going to do is remove that at the very end, and then when I put the shell back together, there's less chance of bits of dirt or fluff and dust or fingerprints actually getting onto the polarizing filter itself. And then when the shell goes back on, I'll probably do yeah, we may as well. I'll do a lens replace on this. So that's that fix. I'm so happy that this is a working screen, and it was a pretty straightforward fix. Just putting on a new filter. The most difficult part was finding the replacement filter online and finding the correct one. Nowhere in the UK sold Game Boy Color LCD polarizing filters. Okay, so there's a few last little things we need to do, and one of those is to kind of give a bit more support to this battery terminal here. At the moment, the solder for the wire to connect to the battery terminal is the only thing kind of holding it in place. And I know that once it's in the shell, the shell here will keep that spring mostly in place, but I just feel that kind of like for peace of mind, I'm going to put some hot glue over this and try and get it to sink in between the terminal there, or where the terminal would sit, just to give it that bit of extra strength. And then the final thing I'm going to do, because I've also had a delivery of these from AliExpress, actually managed to get a few decent things for once on time, a load of speakers to replace in Game Boy. So I think actually those are Game Boy Advance speakers, but I'm pretty confident they'll fit nonetheless. Put that on it just like that. Again, it's like mozzarella, just strings everywhere. It's so annoying, I hate it. Don't know why anyone opts to use this stuff, but here we are. And hopefully I can get in before this starts to dry. But I'm just going to press down on this. I think it's already started to dry actually. So I may have to do that again, or even just heat it up with a hot air station. But it shouldn't stick to the Kapton tape. That seems all right. I might have to do a bit of trimming actually with the knife. Let me just grab it. So obviously where the A and B button would go, I'm just going to cut the excess off there just to give it a bit more room. So I said I was going to replace the lens. Let's do that. So, looking in my spares drawer for a spare Gameboy color lens. Here we go, one from Deadpan Robot here. I think this is, yeah, it's plastic, but it's fine. It doesn't need to be anything special. So, I'm going to pop out the old one and just give it a good push. Not too fussed if I break it because we're not really wanting to keep it, but this one's in good. There we go. He's out. Okay, replacement one's in. I'll take off the protective film once we're finished, because this shell looks pretty good overall. Let's see, we need some 3M tape, so got some spare 3M here. Cut some small thin strips. One. 2, 3. 3 should suffice.